So, First World War, what have we got here?
So this is a khaki serge, obviously carrying on from service dress. This is still what we're wearing. It dates to 1916, which is the middle of the First World War. This would have been worn by other ranks. You can see we have pockets. This is still a trend, and it buttons up to the neck. So officers would actually have had a different style. Theirs would be open, so you could see a tie and a shirt underneath. It's a small distinguishing factor between the two of them. We don't really see too much change. Obviously you're in the trench, you're wanting to blend into those muddy surroundings, but there are kind of innovations that come up. So trench coats really took off in popularity during the First World War when they became part of the standard kit for officers. And the other thing that is again repopularised during this time is the Wellington Boot. Millions were commissioned for men in the trenches to prevent them getting trench foot, and obviously, you know, standing in water for a huge amount of time, you need some decent footwear. So it's really a time of trying to innovate and work out what you need to wear to suit your surroundings.
After a brief post-war boom, Britain faced serious economic woes in the 1920s. Under the recommendation of Sir Eric Geddes, in what became known as the Geddes Acts, public spending was severely reduced. Heavy defence cuts were imposed and the government introduced the 10-year rule, stating that Britain would not enter conflict for at least a decade. But by the 1930s, Hitler's Nazi Party became increasingly aggressive and expansionist, and within 20 years of the Treaty of Versailles, Britain prepared herself to fight once again.
So here we have an example of battle dress. It's a battle dress blouse. This is introduced in 1938, so a little while after the end of the First World War. Carrying on with that practicality trend, high waist, you've still got pockets. The material that's used on this is also really interesting because in 1940, obviously once the war is underway, we get an austerity pattern where they cut back on the amount of material that's being used. So you lose this extra layer here, so the buttons are visible, and you lose the pleats on the pockets as well. And I think that really ties into the socio-economic circumstances at the time.
And do we know if they were a success?
They last for quite a while, up to the 1960s, which is when kind of what we properly think of today as camouflage comes in.
And so this moves us to this one here?
It does, yeah. So this is DPM, which is disruptive pattern material. Huge jump from battle dress to this. So DPM comes in the 1960s with the end of national service conscription in around 1961. The army is looking for a new uniform and they use the combat clothing from the Korean War as a basis to develop a new kind of uniform. And this is where this comes in. This one actually dates to 1980, so 20 years after it's come into wear. But there are also different types of camouflage as well. So you have woodland and then desert, so that you can blend in these different places that you find yourself in.
Yeah, so this is pretty similar to today's uniform, which is only this step forward. So
yes.
What is this different kind of pattern they've gone for here?
So this is MTP, multi-terrain pattern. So this comes in 2010, so it's just over 10 years old now actually. As the name would suggest, it enables you to fight and be active in different types of terrain. So you can see that the colour has changed, and the idea is that when men were fighting in Afghanistan, this would help you whether you were fighting in an urban setting or in fields, and that you could move seamlessly between kind of desert, mountains and kind of wooded areas.
And I can see it's the first uniform that's got Velcro.
Yes, it has Velcro.
I'm surprised almost they have Velcro, because that must be, if you're being dead quiet, you know, that's one of the most noisy things, isn't it, whipping off a bit of Velcro.